Hello there, my name is Crystal Williams. I'm an elementary literacy teacher development specialist with the curriculum department in Houston Independent School District. Today, we'll be reading The Fabled Baguettes of Beaucham by Quentin Flynn and illustrated by Richard Hoyt. This story is a fable. Fables are a kind of traditional tale that uses animals as characters to teach a moral or lesson. There are often characters with clear personality flaws. When they make mistakes and then learn from them, that moral can then be applied to our own lives. As we read today, you will notice that the author uses literal language in an interesting way. He has inserted French words to enhance the story or make it better. The animals' names are the French translation of that word. For an instance, the horse character is named Monsieur Cheval, which means Mr. Horse in English. The title Mr. or Monsieur in French, Mrs. or Madame, and Ms. or Mademoiselle make the story humorous because the characters have fancy names while they make silly mistakes and are shown in a cartoon style in the illustrations. The Fabled Baguettes of Beaucham. There are 5 chapters in this text. We will go through each one as part of this read aloud. Here's some French vocabulary in the Fabled Baguettes of Beaucham. A baguette is a long loaf of bread. Le pain et fils, that means rabbit and sons. Merle, a type of bird. Cheval, a horse. Minette, kitty. Canard, duck. Franc, old French money. Here's vocabulary you will also encounter you may not be familiar with. Yeast is a single-celled fungus that gives off carbon dioxide and is used in baking to make dough rise. Dough is a thick mixture of flour and other ingredients that needs to rise before you bake it in the oven and it becomes bread. Kneaded. To knead is to work moistened flour into dough or paste with the hands. Grumbled. To grumble is to complain or protest about something in a bad-tempered but typically quiet way. Throbbing. When a part of your body is throbbing, it is causing pain in a series of regular beats. Reluctantly. When someone does something reluctantly, they do it in an unwilling or hesitant way. Bleary. When your eyes are bleary, they are blurry and red from exhaustion or too little sleep. Dismay. Dismay is what happens when you feel upset or disappointed by something that happens unexpectedly. Supervise. To supervise someone is to keep watch over them and manage their work. Here are the characters. Mademoiselle Dumer, Monsieur Cheval, Monsieur Lapin, Madame Minette, Monsieur Le Canard. I see that there is a note from the author to the reader. When they were having their breakfast, they thought about the bakers that were making their bread, and they wrote a fable about it. Pretty cool. There's also a map of the village square down below. Lapin et Fils. Monsieur Lapin was the baker in the French village of Beaucham. Every morning at 2 o'clock, Monsieur Lapin got up. He walked past the village's stone houses. He pulled back the bolts on the green door to his bakery, lit the gas lamps, and drew back the curtains. He stood on his stool and cleaned the sign over the window. Le pain et fils, it said. Monsieur Lapin smiled. The sign was so old that the fils were not his sons, nor even his father's sons. They were his granddad and his great-uncle, who had taken over the bakery from their father. While everyone else was asleep, work at the bakery was just starting. Monsieur Lapin carefully measured his flour, water, olive oil, salt, sugar, yeast, and his secret ingredient. Next, he mixed the dough until it was smooth and round. Then he put flour on his table and kneaded the dough until he knew it was ready. He waited for the dough to double in size. Then he kneaded it again and formed it into long baguettes. He waited for the baguette dough to rise again. Then, at just the right time, he put the breadsticks into the hot stone oven. Monsieur Lapin's baking took all night. Finally, when the hot baguettes were cooling in baskets and the main street was filled with the smell of freshly baked bread, Monsieur Lapin tidied his bakery. He sat on his wooden stool to watch the sun rise. Chapter 2. A Nasty Fall. Everyone in the village loved to wake up to the smell of fresh bread, but they didn't love to pay Monsieur Lapin's price. 3 francs for each baguette. Baking bread can't be that hard, said Madame Minette. It's only flour and water, frowned Monsieur Cheval. How hard can it be to mix up dough? Asked Mademoiselle Dumel. He just sits on his stool, watching the sun rise. That's not work, sniffed Monsieur Le Canard. Although they grumbled, the villagers still smiled at Monsieur Lapin and bought his baguettes every morning, until one winter's morning when something bad happened. At 2 o'clock that frosty morning, Monsieur Lapin got up, yawned, and trudged past the silent stone houses. He pulled back the bolts on the bakery door, lit the gas lamps, and drew back the curtains. But as he climbed onto his stool to polish the sign over his window, he slipped. Ouch! Said Monsieur Lapin. He got up off the pavement. He rubbed his wrist, which was sore and throbbing. Inside the bakery, Monsieur Lapin bandaged his wrist, but it was no good. He couldn't lift his sacks of flour, or measure his ingredients, or hold his baker's wooden spoon, or knead his dough. I will go to Madame Meticulous, the doctor, when she opens, said Monsieur Lapin to himself. He sighed and scribbled a note. He stuck it to the window. Closed, it said. Because there was no aroma of baking bread to wake them, the villagers all slept in. And when they did get up and go down to the bakery for their morning grumble and fresh baguette, they found the bakery was closed. They stood outside, wondering what had happened to Monsieur Lapin, and then the baker himself turned the corner, his arm in a giant bandage hanging from a white cotton sling. He had been first in line when Madame Meticulous's office had opened that morning. It is sprained, he explained. I'm sorry. There will be no baguettes today. Or tomorrow. Madame Meticulous says I must rest for another day to let my wrist heal. Chapter 3. A very early morning. No baguettes! This was awful! Everybody loved their crusty baguettes in the morning, even if they did cost 3 francs. The villagers had a meeting to discuss what to do. Baking bread can't be that hard, said Madame Minette. It's only flour and water, frowned Monsieur Cheval. How hard can it be to mix dough? Asked Mademoiselle Dumel. We can sit on stools and watch the sun rise, sniffed Monsieur Le Canard. And so they asked Monsieur Lapin if they could bake the baguettes the next morning. Are you sure? Asked Monsieur Lapin from his feather bed. The villagers nodded. They all thought that if they showed Monsieur Lapin how easy his job really was, he surely wouldn't be able to charge them 3 francs a baguette anymore. Monsieur Lapin reluctantly agreed and gave Madame Minette the keys to the bolts on the heavy green bakery door. Very, very early the next morning, at 2 o'clock, Madame Minette, Monsieur Cheval, Mademoiselle Dumel, and Monsieur Le Canard dragged themselves from their beds. They wondered why on earth they had agreed to get up so early. It's the middle of the night, said Monsieur Cheval, as Madame Minette pulled the bolts on the bakery door. Inside, Mademoiselle Dumel lit the gas lamps, and Monsieur Le Canard drew back the curtains. Everyone yawned, stretched, and gazed at each other through bleary, half-closed eyes. No one had ever been up this early before. "These flour sacks are heavy," muttered Monsieur Le Canard as he emptied one into the mixing bowl. "Oops! Is that too much?" Madame Minette shrugged her shoulders. I'm sure it doesn't matter," she yawned. She poured in some water, and Mademoiselle Dumel and Monsieur Cheval put some oil, salt, sugar, and yeast into the bowl. Monsieur Le Canard mixed and mixed and mixed until his shoulders hurt. Even so, the dough looked very lumpy. "I can't do this anymore," he said, groaning. "It must be ready." Madame Minette put a pawful of flour onto the wooden table and tipped the dough onto the dusty surface. A cloud of flour flew up and made everyone sneeze. "Okay, Monsieur Cheval," she said. "It's kneading time." Monsieur Cheval's eyebrows went up. "Why me?" he asked. "You're the biggest," explained Madame Minette. "Besides," added Mademoiselle Dumel, "how hard can it be?" Chapter 4. Baking Bread. Monsieur Cheval poked the dough with a hoof. He turned it over. He pushed at it. He rolled some up. He poked at it again. He wondered when the sun would come up. "I'm a bit bored now," he said after 2 minutes. "Is that enough?" The others looked at the dough. "Looks okay to us," they nodded. Mademoiselle Dumel lit the stone oven, and they all waited for the dough to rise. As the oven warmed the bakery, the villagers felt sleepier and sleepier. One by one, they fell asleep. Eventually, after an hour, they all woke up again. It's so hot in here," gasped Madame Minette, fanning herself to keep cool. "I feel like it's me who's baking," said Monsieur Le Canard, wiping his forehead. "Look at that," chirped Mademoiselle Dumel, pointing at the dough. The dough had tripled in size and had spread all over the tray. "Our mix must be much better than the one Monsieur Lapin uses," grinned Monsieur Cheval. The villagers felt that the dough was quite big enough and that they were too tired to knead it again. Besides, it was very hot in the bakery and they were hungry. They pulled off pieces of dough and stretched them into long baguettes. Then the baguettes were put in the hot stone oven. Monsieur Lapin, who had been sleeping in his bed, woke up to the smell of something wafting down the street. The baker sat up and sniffed. His whiskers twitched. Something was not right. Monsieur Lapin got out of bed and put on his slippers. He slipped his sling around his wrist and neck. He shuffled past Beaucham's little stone houses and turned the corner. Monsieur Lapin let out a loud chuckle. Outside the bakery, where the baker usually sat on his stool, the villagers lay asleep in the morning sunshine. Monsieur Lapin silently tiptoed into his bakery, past Madame Minette, Monsieur Cheval, Mademoiselle Dumel, and Monsieur Le Canard. A faint curl of smoke wafted out of the stone oven. Monsieur Lapin rolled his eyes, shook his head, and opened the oven door. He chuckled again and put the oven's contents into a basket, which he took outside. "Wake up!" he called cheerily. "It is time for bread. Enjoy your breakfast." The villagers rubbed their eyes. They stretched their tired muscles. They yawned, and their tummies rumbled. And then they saw what was in the basket. Chapter 5. The Secret Ingredient. "I will never again complain about having to pay 3 francs for a baguette," thought Madame Minette, looking at the hard, dry sticks of dough in the basket. "It must be very hard to remember such a recipe," frowned Monsieur Cheval as he tried to eat a piece of dusty, lumpy, salty bread. How hard can it be to mix up dough? Asked Mademoiselle Dumerle, tapping a bit of burnt bread against a stone. Now I know. My muscles feel like they've been kneaded all night long. That baker works so hard, he should charge us 10 francs for a baguette, sniffed Monsieur Le Canard, who looked inside the basket in hungry dismay. Monsieur Lapin smiled at the villagers, whom he knew would never complain about his prices or his bread again. Come on, my friends, we have time to bake more bread, he said. I'll supervise if you do what I tell you. The hungry villagers nodded. They knew they'd never complain again. This time, I'll tell you the secret ingredient, winked Monsieur Lapin, sitting on his stool and relaxing in the sunshine. The secret ingredient? Said the villagers. Monsieur Lapin closed his eyes and sat in the sunlight. Love, he replied simply. And the villagers of Beauchamp knew exactly what had been missing. They had learned their lesson. Things that are made with love always turn out better than things that are not. The end. Well, there's our moral. However, sometimes a story has more than one lesson to be learned. In our next lesson, we'll discuss what other themes can be found. See you soon.